can please be seated. My name is Jim Tour. I met Nabeel in 2012 when he was a student at Rice University. He used to come over to my home to eat. And he enjoyed my wife's cooking. And I remember the first time I sat with him at the kitchen table because he was always there longer than everybody else. And we got to talking. And I remembered when he got the offer from RZIM, it was the same time he had gotten an offer to do his PhD at Rice. And very few offers are made for PhDs at Rice in the religion department. And he says, I'm really torn on what I ought to do. And I said, Nabeel, I can help you. He says, what's that? I said, you would be an idiot not to take the RZIM offer. Be at Barnabas and travel with Paul and learn this. We kept track of each other, and he would send me texts and call me on occasion. And then he called me with the diagnosis that he had gotten. And when he came back to Houston, he asked me to mentor him. And I said, I just pushed him away. I said, no, you don't want me to mentor you. He came back the next week. He said, I really want you to mentor me. I said, you don't know what you're getting into. I said, I'm not Oxford trained. You've got your degree from Oxford. He says, I want you to do this. So finally I agreed. I said, I'm going to speak to you some tough things. And he says, I'm ready for it. You do it. So we would just meet, once every week, once every 2 weeks, just over dinner in my home, just he and I. And I'm going to give you today the first lesson that I ever gave him, which I think was the most impactful lesson. Then I'm going to give you also the last lesson that I gave him, which was given to him in the hospital just recently. And the first lesson was this. I asked him, I said, what have you been reading in the scriptures lately? And he showed me, and I said, so what have you been getting out of it? And he said, well, I've been, critiquing this and studying whether the relevancy of this portion and the authenticity of that portion. And I said, and what's God been saying to you? He says, well, really not a lot. I've just been critiquing it. And I said, that is your problem, Nabeel. Every word in this book is true. Every word in the book is true. God has watched over his word to perform it. And I am so glad that you got all this education, but remember, every word in this book is true. You read the testimony of Billy Graham. It was not until he fell on his knees and said, Lord, I take every word in this book as truth. It was only then that his ministry burst forth. And I said, you have some repenting to do. So we got down on our knees right there in the kitchen. And he repented for not taking God's word as every word being true. He texted me that night and he said, it is just like when I got saved. The Lord is speaking to me so richly through the scriptures. That changed it. I encourage you with that, to challenge you to do the same thing. The last lesson we had was this. It's what I called with him the New Testament challenge. I said, Nabeel, a man, a woman cannot read the New Testament from Matthew to Revelation, cannot read the New Testament twice without becoming a Christian. He said, has that been your experience? I said, absolutely. I've done prison ministry. I speak with professors all the time. I've spoken with big politicians. It works every time. Happened with my own mother that way. If you do not become a Christian sometime going through the first time, and what you do is you open up the New Testament, you start in Matthew chapter 1, verse 1, and you say, Lord, speak to me through the scriptures. If this is real, if this is what God has given us, speak to me. You read through that. You'll get to Revelation chapter 22. If you've not become a Christian, you start reading it again, and boom, it's going to hit you. You will say, there is no man like Jesus Christ, the Son of God. That is the bookends of the lessons that I had with Nabeel. There is some chatter on the internet that Nabeel somehow denied the faith in the end. That is not true at all. I was with him almost every day for the last couple of months. And he continued to stand fast. I never heard him complain. With all his pain, I never heard him He never even told me about his pain. It was only when the nurses would come in and they'd say, what number pain are you up to? And he'd tell me, and I'd go, wow. He never would tell me. He never complained. He never asked, why me? Why is this happening to me? He never asked this. Such an unusual young man. And then, just a few days before he passed, he was very weak and on the bed. And I leaned over his face and I said, Nabeel, I love you. And he opened his eyes. He said, I love you too. And then I took a chant that I taught him, that I learned from the Pakistani and Indian Suffering Church. I learned this as a teenager because I was discipled by Pakistani and Indians when I first got saved as a teenager. And I used to see them go on their processions. And they had this chant where one man would shout at the top of his lungs. And here's the direct translation. Shout, Jesus is the name of, and then the congregation would shout victory. The word victory is ja, ja. And it goes like this, and this is exactly what happened, is I leaned over and I said, Nabeel, Bolo Yesu Kanam Ki. He lifted up his head and he said, Ja! I need my Indian brethren and my Pakistani brethren here to help me out 3 times, like you do on procession. This is the last word that Nabeel said to me. Victory. Jesus is the name of victory. Bolo Yesu Kanam Ki Jai. Bolo Yesu Kanam Ki Jai. Bolo Yesu Kanam Ki Jai.